November 1961, the Secretary of Defense, with Atomic Energy Commission concurrence, directed the activation of Joint Task Force 8 to prepare for a nuclear test series in the Pacific. This series, if conducted, was to be known as Operation Dominic. By early April, the large military AEC Joint Task Force had been organized, manned, and had achieved operational readiness at its forward locations in the Pacific. On the 25th of April, 2 days after receipt of presidential directive to proceed with testing, the first airdrop of the series was made, just off Christmas Island.
Send out probes to go, wait a minute, what in the world? If we're in a dome, how high does this thing go? So they start launching high altitude nuclear bombs. And if you look at the videos on Operation Fishbowl and Starfish Prime and all those high altitude tests, I mean, it looks like they're hitting something up there. I mean, at least from a conspiratorial tinfoil hat wearing perspective, that's what it looks like. Now, this is what blew my mind. You can read more on all that if you'd like. Look up the name Dominic. And again, let's just double check it here. Dominic, D-O-M-I-N-I-C. Look up Dominic, D-O-M-I-N-I-C. From the late Latin name Dominicus, meaning of the Lord. Fishbowl was part of Operation Dominic. It looks like they are sending high-altitude nuclear bombs to test the fishbowl of the Lord, i.e., the firmament.
Yeah. Okay, so what you're seeing here is a printout from Wikipedia. And remind you, I'm describing the firmament. There's something called Operation Dominic, and if you look at the right, you see that explosion at the right there? That explosion on the right, it says Dominic Chama. I want you to keep an eye on that. You see that? So what happened is, if you look at the last sentence in the first paragraph, it says, the Thor missile was used to lift warheads into near space to conduct high-altitude nuclear explosion tests. These shots were collectively called Operation Fishbowl. So what happened was the government, when they started making missiles that were powerful enough that they thought they could break through the sea of glass, they, during the Cold War, used the Cold War as a tactic for exploding high-altitude missiles to try and break through what they already knew was the dome on the Earth. And I'm going to prove all this to you that the government has always known that the Earth is flat. It lies to us through TV, through the media, through movies. It makes you believe the world is a spinning ball hurtling through space like a marble. They even called it Operation Fishbowl. Does that not make you feel any more like you're in a flat Earth with a bowl on top? They called it Operation Fishbowl, and it was to shoot missiles into space because they thought they had the power to finally break through the firmament. And actually what happens, if you read the rest of the article, these missiles would hit up at a certain altitude, and then light would shine all the way to the other hemisphere. And the reason that was is because they were hitting that glass, and the glass was reflecting it all the way across the sky. It's not some globe Earth where they're just trying... Why would they just shoot a missile in the air to see how high it can blow up? Like, are they just playing with rubber bands? Like, they're doing it for a reason, and they called it Operation Fishbowl for a reason. And also, their original name was Dominic Charma, and if you see on your packet, I described what Dominic Charma actually means. Dominic is from the late Roman Italic name Dominicus, and it means belonging to God, and then that word Chama is a fixed, massive, irregular, inequivalent shell. So they originally called it the shell belonging to God, but then they just termed it Operation Fishbowl.
The Johnston Island portion of the 1962 Dominic Test Series, conducted by Joint Task Force 8, included two types of tests. One involved a number of high-altitude nuclear detonations carried aloft by various missiles launched from the island for a study of the effects produced by such detonations. And the other was a group of 5 airdrops over the ocean clear of the island, but within the Johnston Island danger area. These airdrops were a continuation of certain advanced concepts investigations started during the Christmas Island operation. The Starfish, Bluegill, and Kingfish tests were launched by modified Thor missiles, which initially were the only planned high-altitude vehicles. The missile carried externally mounted instrumentation pods for each event to collect data on blast overpressures and thermal and nuclear radiation as potential ICBM kill mechanisms. After each event, helicopter and ship teams recovered the now highly radioactive pods from the sea for delivery to the island and subsequent analysis of their data. In addition, a variety of auxiliary rockets, also launched from Johnston Island, were used to position other instrumentation which telemetered data on X-ray and beta ray pulses, data on radio frequency attenuation through the fireball, explosion debris, and a number of other technical functions. These rockets were fired at carefully programmed times on trajectories oriented around the detonation point and tracked and plotted in space for later analysis of their data. In addition to tracking and recording stations on the island, there were a number of similar stations aboard instrumentation ships underway in the area. These mobile stations could be shifted to positions adjusted to the special requirements of each shot. At the same time, there was an array of airborne instrumentation platforms, both in the vicinity of the island and in the southern conjugate area, to document and record data from vantage points above the clouds. P-2V aircraft, together with destroyers, provided the security and safety surveillance of the extensive danger area surrounding the theater of operations. There were many other sites at remote locations throughout the Pacific Ocean basin, designed, constructed, and oriented to observe and record the phenomena associated with each test. This particular site at Tutuila in American Samoa is representative of the many set up to record test data from the Southern Magnetic Conjugate area. The station was established here to observe and record such things as debris distribution, magnetic and electric field measurements, cosmic noise absorption, optical measurements of the burst and of the fluorescence created by beta rays and bomb debris, plus extensive photographic coverage of the size, intensity, and motion of the conjugate point auroral phenomena. This, basically, is a capsulized breakdown of the instrumentation designed for the collection of the great mass of data required from the high-altitude phase of Operation Dominic. One of the key sites for the entire series was a ship at the pier at Johnston Island. In this ship, the range tracker, with a range safety tracking and control system so vital to the safe and accurate conduct of all firings during the high-altitude phase. The first of the Johnston Island high-altitude firings was bluegill. Ignition of the propulsion system appeared normal. And liftoff was as programmed. On the 8th of July, Starfish Prime, the second try at Starfish, was launched and was entirely successful. The warhead detonated at an altitude of 400 kilometers, 31 kilometers south of Johnston Island. The tentatively scheduled Kingfish event was also authorized for execution at this time. By mid-September, work had progressed to a point from which operations could resume. The tempo increased as units which had gone home or had otherwise been shifted during the rebuilding phase returned to their stations to take up their duties where they left off. The remaining 4 events, Checkmate, Bluegill Triple Prime, Kingfish, and Tightrope, were all successful. A tremendous amount of data was recorded during these events. Literally amazing success was achieved in the complex positioning of instrumentation, including air and rocket-borne equipment, and in the recovery of the recorded information. Some of this information will require a long time for final refinement and analysis. But at the present state of that analysis, it is clear that this further work of refinement will not greatly modify what we now know from these tests. As in other nuclear test operations, B-57 sampler aircraft were used to obtain particulate and gaseous samples from within the cloud for radiochemical analysis to determine the yield for each weapon. 2 especially modified C-130s served as platforms for additional diagnostic data gathering. High-speed cameras aboard these aircraft measured the fireball as a function of time to provide data on total yield, and other instrumentation recorded data on internal device behavior to verify weapon physics. There were control aircraft to position others in the array, search and rescue, photographic, patrol planes to provide surface security around the test area, and other aircraft critically positioned around the 0 point to study thermal radiation, radar attenuation, and chorioretinal effects. Originally conceived essentially to supplement the ground instrumentation and for trial of airborne methods, the airborne instrumentation scheme used in this operation developed into a highly successful primary diagnostic technique. In the 78-day period between 25 April and 12 July, 24 weapon development shots were fired at the Christmas Island site. All drops were on target and within the precise time and space limitations established by the requirements of diagnostic instrumentation. This reflected an outstanding feat of professional airmanship on the part of the B-52 crews. On all occasions, the fusing and firing system worked perfectly, and the device telemetry provided almost complete data on the functioning of these elements. Weather conditions at Christmas Island proved to be quite favorable for this operation. For the planned total of 24 airdrops, there were only 3 occasions when scheduled operations were postponed in advance for 24 hours because of unfavorable forecasts, and it was necessary for the B-52 to return to base with a device on board on only 8 missions. In summary, no significant delays in scheduled operations were experienced because of unfavorable weather.